It's raining, and Zayn and Mahira accidentally sit in the same cab. None of them is willing to accept defeat, and they argue to assert their dominance and make the other person leave the taxi. Zayn resorts to a trick, where he insinuates that the parcel he carries actually has a bomb inside it, due to which Mahira leaves the taxi and runs away. But so does the taxi driver, so Zayn has to find some other way home now. When Mahira makes it to her destination and gets out of the cab, she runs into Zayn again, so she believes he's following her. Zayn denies this allegation and circles her around, checking her out. Mahira flips him off for being so annoying and cheap towards her, before going upstairs to her friend's apartment. Zayn finally hugs his friend Faraz when he gets to his apartment, and congratulates him on his new house. He complains to Faraz about the weird girl he encountered earlier, until he sees Mahira standing in Faraz's apartment. Zayn and Mahira scream at each other, until Mahira picks up a dagger and chases Zayn, who runs out of the apartment in horror. Faraz and his fiancée, who are Zayn and Mahira's friends, go after them in an effort to control the erratic situation. At their friend's party, Mahira gets impressed with Zayn playing the saxophone. They dance together until their friends join them, and eventually fall for each other. 7 years later, they have a son named Dodo together, while their marriage is in shambles. Mahira scolds her son for making drawings of their happy and loving family, which is the furthest away from reality, because she doesn't want him to get any false hopes. He hides under his blanket to avoid her anger. She reads what he has scribbled on paper, which says that his parents never really understood him, which probably means they never truly loved him. She feels bad now and sits on his bed, promising that she loves him a lot. Dodo silently shows that he loves her back. Mahira gets her luggage out and picks out a new shirt from her wardrobe. The bell rings, and Zayn is at the door. He teasingly kisses her on the cheek, informs her that he missed her a lot at work, and requests her to set dinner for him at the table. He keeps talking about how tired he is, how difficult it is to write a script, call the producers for his film, and how much work he needs to do, while she silently stands in her place, her hands crossed with a stern expression on her face, trying to hold her tears in. When he finally notices, he takes her face in his hands, trying to inquire what's wrong. Mahira pushes him away in frustration, unable to believe the audacity he has to keep asking all this again and again. She screams in anger that the only thing wrong is him. She doesn't expect him to admit his shortcomings, as always, but she will no longer stay with him this time. She throws down the keys and bills of the house that she has been taking care of alone, announcing that she is leaving him. He tries to hold her back, because he doesn't understand what's gotten into her. It was 3 days ago that they patched things up, and she assured him that she'd be there to support him. Mahira sees that he has come back to his old nature as soon as he yells at her. Zayn also believes that Mahira is showing her true skin by leaving, something he has prevented all these years. They both feel like the other person never puts any effort into their relationship. Zayn is tired of slaving away, as he works at the office all day to maintain a luxurious lifestyle for her, and writes his script during nighttime to make something out of himself. He expects Mahira to understand his passion for becoming a filmmaker, but she is tired of him being so selfish all the time, and never looking out for her. She storms out of the apartment in anger, while Zayn notices Dodo silently watching their fight from upstairs. Zayn catches up to her at the elevators and tries to make her understand that she's holding a wrong impression of him, and even though he's always busy and never gives her any time, he really loves her. He is very close to success now, and none of it would mean anything if she's not there. He tries to remind her of how much she loved him, that they have a family, and that she's making a huge mistake by walking out on them. But the only mistake Mahira believes she ever made was loving Zayn. As the elevator shuts in his face, Zayn feels angry, but also equally sad that she's walking away. He runs after the cab she's leaving in, while she finally breaks out in tears. Dodo sobs in his room at the breaking up of his family, while Zayn tries to call Mahira, and eventually slams his phone to the ground, breaking it in helplessness. The three of them struggle to look away from the happy memories of the life they had together. The dark and gloomy night finally comes to an end, as Dodo wakes up Zayn the next morning with bad news. He is acting more composed than he was the night before, and alerts him that Mahira has left him for the 5th time. The good news, however, is that she didn't take all her stuff away with her, so Zayn is relaxed that he'll go pick her up at night and bring her back home. Dodo plans to never get married in his life, because he doesn't want to end up in problems like his father. Zayn laughs at Dodo's innocence, and starts to play around with him. Zayn later drops Dodo to his school, where he sees a jeep full of men dressed in black, so he hastens his steps and eventually runs away from them. Dodo is toying with his food at his grandmother's house, where Mahira is staying and bringing him after school. She criticizes him for this, as it's not good manners, but Dodo points out that good manners also involve having dinner with your parents. He wants Mahira to stop being so angry, as soon enough Zayn comes over here to make up with her. He jokes about Zayn standing behind her, and she immediately turns around, which shows how much she loves him. Dodo teaches her that they are one unit, as a family. If one of them is upset, the other one can never be happy. By this time, Zayn really has walked over and is standing behind Mahira, so Dodo runs in his arms in excitement. Zayn and Mahira are sitting in her mother's garden, and Zayn reminds her of how they first met, on a similarly rainy day. He believes that it was meant to be, that they were created to love each other. He is getting scared and scattered about how much they have been fighting recently. Mahira assures him that she would never let any of this happen. All she wants him to do is just fulfill one thing that she is asking of him, to put his film on the back burner for a while, as he can always make it later, and focus on their lives for some time. Zayn breaks the good news to her, that he has a meeting with the producer tomorrow to sign a contract for his new film. She is excited for him, and congratulates him by letting him kiss her cheek. Dodo is watching this romantic moment, and is happier than ever, because that's how he likes to see his parents. They rejoice to see him as well, and bring him to the garden, dancing with him. The producer watches an item number on a screen and pauses it immediately. He is in disbelief about how the director of the film has totally covered the hot and sizzling woman he picked out for the item number. He reminds the director that the film will be released on Eid, not during Ramzan, and that is why the public want to see a more scantily clad item girl. He is a huge pervert, and believes that dressing women in short clothes will get the ratings for his film. He is a filthy producer, and stops the director's paycheck for not making a vulgar film, and scolds the makeup artist for not making the actresses more fair-skinned than they actually are. He regrets hiring a respectable TV director, instead of a commercial film one who would have made him tons of money. He puts an agreement for a TV serial in front of Zayn, who is disappointed because of the misleading information he was provided earlier. Zayn is only interested in a contract for the film, no matter how much the TV gig pays. That's why he declines the producer's offer and walks out of his office. Mahira brings out the cake for Dodo's birthday party, which makes him thrilled. He asks where his father is, but Mahira responds that Zayn is a filmmaker now, so now they'll have to wait for him at times. The bell rings and Mahira goes to answer it, assuming that it's Zayn. She opens the door with her eyes closed, putting her cheek forward for Zayn to kiss, like he always does. But what she doesn't know is that it's actually Chima, the gangster Zayn ran away from earlier. He holds her cheek and makes a pass at her, causing her to scream and run away as soon as she opens her eyes and sees him. Faraz, who is also attending the birthday party, shouts at Chima and his henchmen, demanding to know who they are. Chima pulls out a gun and threatens to shoot Faraz. Chima wants to know what the occasion of the celebration is, and Dodo blurts out that it's his birthday before Mahira puts her hand over his mouth. Chima sends everyone out, and now it's just Mahira, her mother, Dodo, Faraz, and his wife left in the apartment with Chima and his goons. He lights up the candles and forcefully makes Dodo cut his birthday cake, his evil laughter terrorizing the poor kid. They're singing Dodo a birthday song while he's sitting on Chima's shoulders when Zayn enters. He immediately takes Mahira and Dodo away from Chima, and shouts at him for coming to his house for money, even though he promised to give it to him already. Chima innocently claims that he is here just to remind him to pay him back, and leaves. Dodo is traumatized, and is crying uncontrollably while the adults try to recover from the scary experience. Zayn throws the untouched cake after putting Dodo to bed, while Mahira puts away all the food that she cooked for the guests. Zayn recognizes his mistake, apologizes for it, and promises to fix it, but Mahira doesn't believe in him. She is furious at him for chasing a dream that's taking him away from reality, and letting down their son. Zayn argues that he can't settle down for TV serials where he writes about women who are shown in distress all the time. Mahira responds that this comes at the cost of his wife being in constant distress. That night, both of them lie sleepless on opposite edges of their bed, and Zayn eventually sleeps on the floor. He wakes up the next morning to an empty house and a note from Mahira, asking him to not approach her, because they're done. He goes to Mahira's mother's house again to get them, but Mahira is no longer ready to sacrifice her or Dodo's life for a man who only cares about his dreams. They both degrade each other, and Zayn gets so instigated that he raises his hand and almost hits her. They realize that Dodo has been watching them and is very scared. They both start fighting over him and demand him to make a choice. He hides in Mahira's arms and apologizes to her before running to Zayn. Mahira tries to get Dodo back, but Zayn leaves with him. Zahid is looking for a TV show host for his morning show, but none of the women at the auditions appeal to him, so he kicks them all out. He is praying to find the ideal woman when Mahira walks in. He shuns her away like all the other women, and she starts to cry. It is when he sees her innocent, teary-eyed face that he offers her to host his TV show. Zayn takes out his father's old belongings, who also wanted to be a filmmaker, and misses both him and Mahira. Mahira, on the other hand, is ready for her first day of shooting, where she even won't need glycerin and can cry on demand. The show is broadcasting and she starts her monologue. Audiences watch her attentively, and so do Zayn and Faraz, as the show is playing on the TV at their office too. Mahira wins over the people, so much so that even Zayn's boss commands Faraz to consider her for endorsing their brand. Zayn storms out of the room in a rage. Mahira is interviewing a rape victim on the show, but Zahid starts commercials, because the interviewee isn't crying enough. Mahira straightforwardly tells her that she won't get any justice until she cries, and with this approach, turns into a celebrity. Zayn has finally convinced a lawyer to fight the custody case against Mahira, but he'd still have to pay him a huge sum of money in advance. One day Mahira visits him at his office and asks why he hasn't been picking up her calls. house. She reminds him of the hotshot she is now and orders him to hand over Dodo, and she might consider letting them meet once or twice a month. If things get to court, she threatens to not ever let him see her son again. This is the last straw for Zane, and he shouts at her in front of everyone, slams a glass on the floor, and kicks her out of his office. Zane's boss nags at him for upsetting such an important client, which eventually costs him his job too. Mahira watches an old video of one of Dodo's birthday parties and misses her son. Zane struggles with managing all the expenses and prays to God to help him out, because he can't lose his son at any cost. What Dodo wants is to be with both his parents together, as a happy family. In the court hearing, Mahira lies and acts like Zane physically abused her, to strengthen the case. Dodo loudly denies this accusation, and is brought as a witness to be questioned in court about who he wants to be with. Dodo looks over at his parents one by one, and replies that he equally loves them both and doesn't want to choose one. Mahira's lawyer brings Zane to testify, and shows him as a complete failure as a father and a husband. Zane loses his temper and ends up begging the court to keep his dignity, because he doesn't have the money or reputation to play these games in the name of justice. The judge gives his decision in Mahira's favor, and Zane is told to keep his distance until he can afford to take care of Dodo. The reporters swarm around Zane as soon as he gets out of the court, and one of them makes a comment which leads to Zane going ballistic on them, until the cops drag him away. While he is getting beaten up on the street in the rain, Zane sees Dodo crying and reaching out for him in Mahira's car, driving away from him. After Faraz bails him out, Zane breaks all family pictures at his house and accepts the producer's offer. He has also been sneaking in to meet and play with Dodo from time to time. Zane and Dodo conspire and execute their plan, as one day, Dodo runs away with Zane on his way to school. When Zahid's team informs him of Dodo's kidnapping while Mahira is doing her show, he decides to use it as an opportunity to boost her viewership. Zane has barely managed to avoid a police chase when Chima corners him. Zane pleads to him to let him go, but he and his men beat Zane up in front of Dodo. Dodo punches Chima with all his might to protect his father, and Chima throws him away. This infuriates Zane so much that he single-handedly beats all of them up, but the police get to him. Dodo is being stubborn about staying with his father, so much that Mahira gets irritated and slaps him. Dodo sobs and tells her to leave his room, which breaks his mother's heart. Mahira visits Zane in lockup and posts his bail. Zane is still mad at her for lying about him hitting her, because she wanted to satisfy her ego and degrade him. Mahira's heart softens at his state, and she tries to be nice to him, but Zane doesn't see her the same way anymore, and signals her to leave. When she does, he turns around and watches her walk away, as hope diminishes from his eyes. Mahira hasn't been to work in some days, so Zahid pays her a visit, because he's concerned about his ratings. Mahira is disgusted by his insensitive and exploitative nature as he gives her a solution that would benefit him too. Mahira should hand over Dodo to Zane, and when he realizes that he doesn't have the means to raise his son, his love will be overcome by the power of money, and he'll no longer try to ask for him ever again. Zane gets kicked out of his apartment, and the landlord has confiscated all his belongings too, because Zane has failed to pay rent for a while. He is contemplating where to go when Dodo comes running to him and joy at finally being reunited with him. Dodo looks forward to all the fun he'll have with his father, now that Mahira has finally allowed them to be together. A homeless and penniless Zane takes Dodo to a shrine in hopes of getting refuge, because the rest of the world has given up on him. There, they pray and eat charity food, but Dodo gets sick and unconscious when it rains, and they have no roof over their head. Mahira sees the rain and grieves over all the memories it brings back. This is when Zane comes screaming at her house with an unwell Dodo in his arms. This is the last straw for Zane and Mahira. Zane wakes up from his nightmares on the street, as a homeless shabby man. 6 months have passed by, and he still misses his son like a madman. Dodo visits Faraz and finally finds out Zane's whereabouts. Zane is frantically dancing, like he once did with his son, when Dodo finds him. He tries to interact with Zane, but he's hostile and unresponsive toward him. Zane kicks Dodo out, claiming his father has passed away. He holds himself back while Dodo begs him for a kiss and hug and eventually leaves, resenting him. One day, Zane stumbles upon old drawings and writings of Dodo, and realizes how much his son loves and needs him. He takes out his father's old typewriter and starts writing the most real story he's ever known, the story of his own life. He cleans himself up, and gets paid 20 lakh rupees for the script he wrote. He will start shooting as soon as he makes up with his best friend Dodo. He goes to his school with pizza in his hand to set things right with his son, as he has finally made himself worthy of being his father. Dodo sees him across the street, runs towards him in excitement, and gets hit by a car on the road. Zane rushes him to the hospital, where Mahira arrives in panic. They are both trying to be there for him while the paramedics take him to the operation theater for surgery. Zahid is broadcasting the show at an unscheduled time at Mahira's request, with expectations of this episode going viral. She comes clean about how her show capitalizes on women and their adversaries, and she partakes in this, even though she is one of them. She discusses how the tragedies in women's lives are made into spectacles for people to watch and sympathize with, while justice only comes at a cost. She brings up how the appearances of these hosts change as they adopt modesty in Ramzan, which completely disappears by the time of Eid. She doesn't mean to discredit every host but herself. She admits that she's a liar, and maybe karma is catching up to her. She issues a public apology and requests everyone to pray for her son's life. Her plight makes everyone tear up, including Zahid. It is raining as Zayn sits outside the hospital and rips up the check he got for the money. Mahira picks it up and can't understand why he did this, as this was his lifelong dream that he just tore into pieces. Zayn argues that his dream was based on Dodo being with them, alive and healthy. This film means nothing to him under these circumstances, as he did all this in the first place for his son. Mahira inches closer to him, crying and apologizing. They both hug each other, wailing due to the pain only they can understand, as Dodo's parents. This tragedy they share has made them grow closer to each other as their son hangs on the edge. They talk about the time when Dodo was born as a premature baby, and doctors predicted that he wouldn't make it. But that small baby Dodo smiled at his parents from the incubator, because he was going to survive to be in their paradise with them. They regret how much pain they put their child through because of their stubbornness. They feel like they have failed as parents and are crying together in desperation now. Zayn decides that they don't deserve to be parents, so they shouldn't hold Dodo back anymore, and should let him return to the stars he came from, as he is in so much pain. He goes to while Mahira tries to run after him to stop him. Zayn takes off Dodo's and signs the papers to pull the plug, while Mahira hysterically cries, trying to stop everyone from committing this atrocity. The doctors leave, but Mahira desperately tries to reach out to her son in an effort to revive him, to make him come back. Seeing her and remembering Dodo's words sparks something in Zayn, and he joins Mahira too. Together, they try to call out to their son and rescue him, to take him home with them. Dodo opens his eyes, and they look at each other in a pleasant surprise. He came back for both of them, because that is what he has wanted all along. They can't believe the power their love has held combined. Even though they were the adults in that family, their naive kid has taught them that life is so beautiful when you are together with your loved ones.